Minister, we're strongly opposed to this section in the legislation. Whatever about, and I know changes were brought in under the last government for a reduced rate of payment for 18, 19-year-olds, and I think there was a good rationale for that, because I don't think it's right that somebody would go straight from school onto the dole. Unfortunately, in many areas, we have a history of intergenerational dependence on social welfare. And I think the rationale behind that change was to break that cycle and give young people an incentive to take up training and education opportunities and make sure that they actually get out there and have the incentive to work. But there's a hell of a difference between that and now paying 25-year-olds €100 a week at the age of 25. You're talking about, in many cases, young people who not only have an undergraduate degree, but also have master's levels qualifications. So for the government to be saying to them that they'll get a higher rate of payment if they do a back to education course, or if they do a FOSS course, or if they do some other lower level of education or training course, doesn't add up. These are young people who have educational qualifications, who, if they could get a job, would grab it with both hands. But the reality is, for many young graduates, is that the jobs simply aren't available, and that's why we have such a shockingly high rate of youth unemployment. And of course, even in the figures on youth unemployment, it's 30%. That doesn't capture those who have left the country because there aren't opportunities here. That's just the young people who are left here. So of course, the true figure is far higher. So there's no doubt about it in my mind that this, in bringing the cuts up to that level, 25, 26, this is not an activation measure, and I think it's deeply disingenuous to try and sell it as such. This is just, it's a cut, it's an attempt to make savings from a particularly vulnerable generation, and all it will be at the end of the day is an incentive to emigrate, because people can't live on €100 a week. The job seekers allowance is only payable to people who have low income in the first place. Otherwise, it's a means-tested scheme, so they won't qualify if there's a decent level of parental income in the house if they're living at home. They'll only qualify if they're living in a low-income family, or if they're supporting themselves. So you're then expecting somebody who's in that situation, who's in a family that can't actually afford to look after their financial needs, often in many cases having struggled to get their young person through college to meet all the costs of education, and to come out at the other end and be denied financial support, I think is very, very unfair. So Minister, I would urge you to rethink this, particularly at the higher end of that age bracket. There aren't enough. I mean, I suppose there are different categories of young people, and Senator Van Tornout mentioned, that for some training will be. I mean, the measure that's being brought in is so crude for such a wide group of people. Because of course, for some young people, some of the people in that age cohort will be early school leavers, who would benefit from taking part in a relatively basic education course, or from being able to go back to education and go and get a college qualification and all of that. But others at the far end are highly educated. Certainly the last thing they need after 4, 5, 6 years in college in some cases is more education. What they need is a job, and there aren't enough places on the education side to meet those who do actually have educational needs, and there aren't enough on the training side for people who have the education but not the training. So I think one of the flaws in all of this, and the government has repeatedly referred to the youth guarantee. I think all of us in this House strongly support the youth guarantee, but the reality is the resources aren't being put into actually backing it up and ensuring that every young person is offered either an education, a training, or a work placement that's relevant to them, that recognises the qualifications and skill level that they already have, and gives them something that will actually make them more job ready, and help them to actually gain paid employment. That's the big gap here. That guarantee is not there. There are nowhere near enough places being offered for the full age cohort. You've over 66,000 people, and the number of places is only a fraction of that. So I think this is a very, very unfair measure. I think that actually in large part it has, in the post-budget analysis and media coverage and all of that, seems to kind of pass by quite quickly, because maybe some of the media analysts and other people who are commenting on it don't understand the impact that it has. But I know the Union of Students in Ireland, the National Youth Council, all the different groups We're in at the Social Protection Committee as well, pointing out the really severe impact that this is going to have on young people. And at the end of the day, it doesn't add up from an economic point of view either, because we've invested in getting our young people top-class education, getting them degrees, and then at the end of the day, all they're being handed is a one-way ticket to Canada or to Australia or somewhere else, and told go off there for a few years, because we want to disincentivise giving you the opportunity to actually look for employment here, because a lot of young people made the point to me, you couldn't, to get a job, the reality for people from the country is they have to come up to Dublin to look for jobs. How on earth is somebody supposed to survive in Dublin with rent and everything else on €100 a week and actually find a job? So it just takes that opportunity out of their hands altogether and is forced them towards the airport instead. So I think it's incredibly unfair, and it's for that reason that we're opposing it.